The easiest place I can think to start with Beatdown's RPG mechanics is leveling up. You get experience from both group fights and 1v1 fights, but you get way more experience from 1v1 fights. After you do level up, then you can choose to allocate the experience into 3 areas: your stamina, your technique, or your attack. These are fairly self-explanatory. Stamina raises your health, attack raises your attack power, and technique determines which moves you're allowed to learn. Allocating points kind of works in an interesting way, and I think I know why they did this, but I should explain it first. You can put your points into any of the 3 areas I mentioned, but simply putting points into a stat doesn't make it increase. You have to put a required amount of points into a stat for it to increase. For example, in order to increase a stat from rank 0 to rank 1, you'll need to put 6 points into it, and you always gain 3 points per level. In order to increase a stat from rank 1 to rank 2, you'll need to put even more points in than previously, and so on. Each stat can only go up 5 ranks. In addition, the amount of experience you need to level up never changes. You always need exactly 100 experience to level up, and no matter how far you get in the game, it will remain 100 experience. It may seem odd for them to have done it in this fashion, but I think the reason it's done this way is because the enemies don't scale with you. They don't get harder as the game goes on or anything like that. It's a game where you can be lazy and avoid the level up system entirely, but leveling up gives you a lot of benefits. And I have a hunch most reviewers and consumers did ignore the level up system. And this is because leveling up takes a really damn long time, and it takes even longer to rank up one of your stats. This is less noticeable if you're exploring the open world to its fullest, but if you're just trying to complete the story, then it will seem like having 15 separate ranks is a bit of a joke. And I think that's a shame, because there are benefits to playing around with the leveling up system, such as ranking up your technique all the way and getting a whole bunch of new moves. Most new moves are either bought from Melvin inside the bar, where he makes you perform them 3 times consecutively, or new moves can also be gotten from recruiting NPCs, but the NPCs have to be martial artists. Speaking of the named NPCs, they're probably one of the game's biggest selling points. Nearly every named NPC you encounter can be robbed, killed, interrogated, or recruited. Almost every named NPC is completely optional, but they all have their own movesets, personalities, and design. There are 2 ways you can interact with named NPCs. You can either do a negotiation with them inside combat or outside of combat. It's better to do it inside of combat though, because if you do it inside of combat you get experience. Basically, it's just more profitable to hit people. Starting from the least important mechanic to the best, interrogating NPCs gets you information about new things available to buy in town, or some mechanics you may not even know existed, like taxis. Apparently there are taxis, and I still don't know how you use those. But yes, the basics behind interrogation are that it simply gives you insight into mechanics you might not have known existed, or just tells you that you can buy new clothes. Then there's robbing, which is probably where you're going to get most of your cash from. When you're doing a negotiation with a named NPC, you can choose to rob them, and they'll give you all the money they have on hand. You can rob a named NPC multiple times, but each time you rob them, they'll give you less money. Lastly, and most importantly, you can recruit NPCs. Recruiting them adds them to your blacklist, which, in spite of its name, means that you can call them anytime to have them hang out with you and beat up bad guys. Well, I guess you're the bad guy, but look, it's a little bit gray. The point is that you want to collect them all. You want to collect all the named NPCs, because each time you collect one, they get added to a list and you can call them and make them hang out with you or teach you new moves. Any recruited NPCs help you fight in group combat, but they also act as extra lives in 1v1 combat, which is very useful if you're having trouble with a particular boss. You should note though that just recruiting an NPC doesn't mean they'll be all buddy-buddy with you all the time. Since each NPC has their own personality, some of them get along better than others. Some of them prefer to hang out with certain other NPCs, and some of them just won't like you. Figuring out which NPCs are most loyal can be a bit of a crapshoot, but I think they become more loyal the more you use them. It is possible for some named NPCs to get pissy and just walk out on you, although I have had this happen very infrequently. But to sum it up, recruiting named NPCs can give you new fighting buddies and new moves, so there's no reason not to recruit everyone you find. And secondly, robbing named NPCs can generate a lot of cash flow, though there is an alternate way to generate cash flow, and it's also the reason why I keep referring to these people as named NPCs. Because in addition to named NPCs, there are generic unnamed NPCs and also group combat enemies. Unnamed NPCs are generally civilians, and they all have their own unique dialogue, but you can't recruit them or engage them in 1v1 fights. However, you can beat the tar out of them and rob them, and they either drop an item or money most of the time. It doesn't matter how innocent someone is, you can just choose to punch them and take whatever they've got in their wallets. This is a very good financial decision as well, because some of them drop health items, and that means you no longer have to go around buying health items. A good way to know whether you're robbing enough people is to think about the paywall in the 5th chapter. If the paywall in the 5th chapter sounds like too much money, then you're not exploring the open world enough. But in addition to robbing innocent civilians, there are other group combat enemies you can also rob. These guys actually want to hurt you, and they consist of Zanetti's henchmen and the cops. Zanetti's henchmen are mobsters that dress in very stylish suits, and the cops only come in 1 or 2 flavors, but are no less formidable. You get way more experience from fighting Zanetti's henchmen and the cops than you do from beating up civilians, and they also generally drop more interesting items. However, since Zanetti's henchmen and the cops wander the streets, it can be difficult to get from place to place without encountering and fighting them. Now, I personally think this is a great thing because I like the fighting in this game, but if you'd like to go place to place without getting into an encounter, there is a system to get around that. In the upper left of the screen, you have 2 wanted meters. One of them is for the cops and one of them is for the mobsters. The wanted meter goes down if you change your clothes, and the wanted meter goes up if you do something stupid, like punch random civilians, rob from random civilians, or just get all up in the cop or mobsters' faces like an asshole. Now, I've heard a lot of people complain that the wanted meter mechanic doesn't really mean anything because it goes up too quickly, and I think they're probably objectively wrong. If you want to, you can actually play the entire game like a discount stealth game and only fight 1v1 battles against named NPCs and boss fights. It doesn't even take that much effort to disguise yourself because, as you're seeing here, I'm just changing the color of the clothes I already have, and my wanted meter ultimately goes down to 27%. So it's possible to almost entirely avoid group combat, and it takes forever for the wanted meter to go back up, unless, again, you're doing something very stupid. I personally don't care very much about the wanted meter mechanic because I like running into random combat, but I still felt it was important to tell you that people were wrong and the wanted meter mechanic works fine. It works even better if you do things like get plastic surgery, which is a thing you can do in this game. In addition to helping with the wanted meter, it also just offers a lot of customization that you can buy so many new clothes and even change your face entirely. And here's the part where I would normally talk about side missions, but I'm not actually sure how to do that, as the side missions are arguably more expansive than the entire main campaign. The side missions do offer a lot of money as a reward, but are generally very difficult. You can get some of them from Melvin and some of them from the record store owner, but some of them are just incredibly obtuse. I personally think it's worth tracking the side missions down because they're just as interesting as the main story, but I guess that's up to your preference. In the end, the RPG mechanics are the biggest part of what make Beatdown special, what make Beatdown what it is. It was clear that this was intended to be a very large project, and I'm not sure how much money was spent on it, but I'm glad that I can at least tell you that I personally think it was worth it, because there are very few games like this. I'm not saying there were no other games like this, but there are very few. And even the other beat-em-ups similar to this one don't have mechanics exactly like it, so there are quite a few unique things that Beatdown brings to the table. Sadly, there is one big weak link in Beatdown, and we'll discuss that one next time.